Alright, and skadoom. Welcome everyone. This is 3D sculpting for 3D printed miniatures. And kind of obvious, you know. We're talking, yeah. Talking 3D printed miniatures for like tabletop war games, role-playing games, what have you. Now, if this is your first time here, and you're watching this after the fact, of course, because I'm the only one currently in, according to this. Don't forget to like, subscribe, bell icon, usual nonsense. Also in the description, I've got another channel that's about old school gaming, tabletop gaming, and Patreon. I've got figures for download, figures for sales, whatever floats your boat. Also, like it says down below, right under here. Oops. I didn't make a mistake. No. Instead, what's happening is I'm going to be sculpting a figure whose blacksmith made a mistake. Okay, I don't know how much y'all know out there about how swords and that are forged. Blades are forged. But you've got to both harden, that's the quench, and temper, where you heat it up to a certain level and let it air cool, in order for the crystalline structure of the steel to be at its strongest and hardest. If you quench but don't temper, you have something that's very, very hard. A file will skate across it like glass, but the first time you try to parry a blow or strike somebody that's got a shield or armor or some other hard implement, it's gonna shatter. By the same token, if you temper it but don't harden it, when you hit, your sword's gonna look like this. If there's too much carbon, you end up with cast iron. If there's too much carbon, cast iron. Not enough carbon, wrought iron. Neither of which is good for a weapon, although cast iron is great for pans. And then, come on, little buddy. You're crying at me from the window. Come on out. Anyway, so you've got to get the steel just right. And if you don't, well, you've got a useless blade, which is nothing like a tail in your face. Or a cat butt. Cat butt. Anyway, so the figure tonight is going to be a fighter whose blacksmith forgot to temper. Yeah. I can't sculpt with you on my shoulder like that. You know that, right? Really? Can I ask you a question? Hey, fuzzbutt. Can I ask you a question? I'm gonna whisper it into your ear. Can you get up on the bed? It's right next to you. Hello. Thank you. It's one of 3. And he's supposed to be up here, not up here. Okay, like I'm trying to say, I'm going to be sculpting a figure that is a fighter whose sword broke. We're going to go ahead and we're going to switch to this. This is my basic figure, my new basic figure that I use to sculpt on. This program is Daz Studio, and I've got him rigged up so that he's articulated. I can then go to the content library, and we're going to go ahead and load in boots and boot cuffs, and then we're going to add on baggy pants and the bottom of a tunic. Okay, can you get up there? Or okay, at least get off my shoulder. No, get your paw off my shoulder. Get up here. No. Do you mind? Sometimes I think my cats are too affectionate. Yeah. Get over here, fuzzbutt. Not on me. Hey, furball, over here. No, not on me. On the bed. Let me get my work done, okay, little buddy? Alright. There you go. Go figure. Now he will also need a sword. And for that we're going to go to my older version. And we're going to get, let's see, an arming sword in his right hand. Simply because the arming sword is what most people think of when they think sword. Okay. Now I have to do one thing real quick to tweak the thumb because it's using the bends from the previous version. All bend 0, side to side 0, twist 0. Okay, now I've got to fit the fist around the hand, fit the hand around the sword. Sure, okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off. We're going to use this tool to kind of move it down just a little bit so that it's no longer poking through the palm. Actually, no, let's do this. Let's tilt it ever so slightly. No, that's too much. There. Just enough so it's not completely poking through the palm. Then we take the thumb, side to side it a bit like, oh, no, not the hand, the thumb. There we go. And we're going to make it bend down a bit. And back just a little. Wrong one, there we go. Okay, now we're going to bend the fingers. We're going to start by getting all 4 starts of the fingers. We're going to bend them to there. And then we can see that that sword is too far towards the heel of the palm. So we've got to put it about here. And there we go. That's about right. And then from here we're going to close the rest of the grip. Alright, the pinky's going a little bit too far. That's the, whoop. That's the blue one that we need to turn. Yep. Now we turn it at the middle and at the tip. There. As you can see, unlike my previous version, each joint of the finger is articulated in this version of the base figure. We're gonna pull it out just a little and bend it forward just a good bit, and then bend the tip. If you can't tell, I'm using the blue circle on this little gizmo that appears. That's what's representing the bend for this particular joint. Now we're going to bend here and then bend here. We're wanting to make it look like it's actually holding the weapon without, like, you know, passing completely through the figure's hand. There we go. And now we're going to select the index finger there, bend it to about there. In case you're wondering why the index finger gets a little bit more bend, that's because it's the pivot. You see, when you hold a sword, you're actually holding it like this. This is where your core is on the blade. The index finger is the power, and the trigger finger is kind of like a pivot to kind of pull it back. But sometimes you switch your grip, whoops, so that your front two fingers are holding it, and the act of closing the back of the hand provides an additional torque on the strike. So he's got it in that style grip. And now that it's also closer to the front, we can bring that base of the thumb a little bit closer to the rest of the hand. That's the green, but we're going to use the red too. And then we're going to bend it here. We're going to rotate at the base a little. And then bend here. Okay, that's all we really needed to do to that hand. The rest of what we're going to do is going to be entirely on the rest of the pose. So we're going to hide the sword, the boots, the cuffs, the baggy pants, and the tunic skirt. We're going to zoom in, and now we're going to figure out what kind of pose do we want. Oh, let me go ahead and pop out chat. And yes, that particular cat is named Ralph. Anyway, going back to Daz Studio. Now, one of the key things about making a pose is that the hips, the line that goes from where the leg pivots into the other leg pivots, makes up a little plane. It must never be parallel to the ground in any axis. So, you gotta figure out what kind of pose I'm gonna do. So he's gonna kind of tilt the hips to the side a little bit. And bend back a little bit. So the hips are now absolutely not parallel to the floor in any way, shape, or form. We're then going to take the abdomen. We're going to bend back even more on the abdomen, side to side, to counter, and we're going to twist it a little bit because he's going to be presenting that blade like, oh! Now the chest will bend forward. It's going to go further side to side. Fuzzball. And it's going to rotate a bit more. And now that is neither parallel to the, let's move a little bit more like that. You don't want the line of the shoulders to be parallel to the hips or the floor in any angle, because then you'd have problems with it looking unnatural. So he brings the shoulder forward a bit, down a little. We're going to twist the arm this way. We're going to go forward a little bit like this, but not a lot. Then we're going to bend the arm and twist it just a little. And grab the hand. I'm going to go side to side and bend it that way. And twist it a bit more like that, so that when he's looking at it, he's going to be looking at where the sword broke. We're going to tilt the neck side to side and back a bit, and then tilt the head forward. And then tilt it, or not tilt it, but twist it so he's looking at the blade. Okay, that looks decent, but it's not good enough. So what we're going to do is we're going to pin the translation and rotation of the chest. Then we're going to grab that hand and we're going to move it out a bit farther forward so that he's a bit more stunned, and then over a little bit. Now I'm going to pivot it and we want him looking at the blade, not the handle, so we're going to tilt his head back up a little bit and twist it even more to the side. Yeah, that's a bit more of a dramatic hold pose. Now, we're going to rotate the shoulder before we do anything else. We're also going to lift it. Then we're going to lift it at this up here and twist it so that the elbow is kind of going to be pointing out, and then bend it here, twist there, and then we're going to twist from the hand. And then we're going to bend the hand a bit. It's like, now with the chest still pinned, we're going to grab the hand, we're going to grab this tool again. We're going to kind of move it a bit more like that. Actually, one thing I forgot to do, we're going to select that arm and we're going to block side to side. The elbow does not bend side to side. You think it does, but what's actually happening is your upper arm is twisting. So now we'll go ahead and grab this and we're going to move it to there, and then we're going to pull it up just a bit. We're going to bend it that way, and then we're going to expand from selected the whole hand. We're going to bend all of these fingers at the same time. We also need to twist this hand a bit more like that, and then we're going to drag it backwards a bit. And let's kind of pull it this way a bit. Yeah, there we go. Actually, let's kind of position it about there. Yeah. Now we got to do the legs. Now the way I had those hips going, this leg will need to pivot down and just kind of bend at the shin a little, just a little. We go to front view, zoom in. We're going to lift this aside just temporarily and make the boots visible, so we can tilt this foot side to side. There we go. Now we're going to hit Control D. That's going to drop that foot to the floor. Go back to perspective view. That's so that we can see how he's standing. Now this leg is going to go back a little, down, bend back at the ankle, at the knee rather. Bend it forward and twist a little. We're going to go to the front view once again, so we can try and make this a bit more and we now have him kind of standing there, not quite in a static pose, but staring at his what soon to be broken sword. We're going to then come down and add on the boot cuffs, the baggy pants, and the tunic skirt, just to see how that looks. Okay, and we're going to discover something that we have to do with that tunic skirt. Okay, we're going to close the collars, and we're going to expand the tunic skirt. Now that right thigh, it has a side to side and nothing else. The right thigh on the tunic needs to go a little bit further. Whoops, needs to go a little bit further out to try and, you know, make it a bit more dramatic. The left thigh has a twist, 24.27. So we're going to go to left thigh here, and it's going to be negative 24.27. Then we're going to rotate it out. And one thing that did was it got rid of a wrinkle that was forming back here that we don't want. Okay, now I'm going to lift the hand just a little bit more to make room for hair. Okay. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to hide that sword, and then the other bits, and we have our base figure geometry. Okay, it's going to be File, Export, and then we're going to go from here, New Base Figure, Broadcast, New Folder. Oops. I'm going to start the working geometry off with the letter Z. So Z, body. Accept. Hide it. File, Export, Z, sword. When you export in DAZ Studio, it exports every bit of geometry that is currently visible, which is why I'm hiding these and turning on the others. I'm going to, let's see, File, export the boots, accept. File, export the boot cuffs, accept. File, export the pants, and then file, export the tunic, accept. And then I'm going to ZBrush. And here's where the actual sculpting begins. That gave us our base geometry. In real world sculpting, that's like making a skeleton out of wire and slapping on your core basic form putty or clay. You know, assuming additive sculpture, like is used from tabletop miniatures. Now we're going to import from here, new base big, broadcast, oops, body. We're going to make the body be on the top of the list. And one thing you can notice about this is that you can see the polygons. It's flat shaded. You know, this is probably less offensive. If I turn on this line fill, you can see the outlines. You can also see where the various joints are, and I just realized I screwed up something. I'm going to make the body visible again and hide the tunic skirt. I'm then going to zoom in on the head. Why? Because I now need to do all of the posing for the expression. I've got to open the mouth a bit more. Then I'm going to take the corners of the mouths and I'm going to bring them down so it's got a more horrified look. Okay. Now I'm going to take the brow. I'm going to do one brow and then mirror it. I'm going to twist, which gives us that. I'm then going to raise it by doing that. I'm then going to make it pop out a bit more by giving it a Z scale. Okay. We're going to twist it a bit more. We're going to side to side it a bit. We want this to be exaggerated. This is a comedy figure. Okay, now we're going symmetry, right to left, accept. And one other thing I just realized I forgot, which means I'm going to have to redo everything except for the sword. I forgot to go in here under new figure, under adjust, and pop that muscular up 100%. Make him a total beefcake. Now, why does this mean I'm going to need to redo all the rest? Well, look at these. They actually bulged out with the morph. Okay. Now, let me go ahead and hide them again. File, export, Z body. Yes. Accept. Hide it. Make the boots visible. File. Export. Z boots. Yes. Accept. File. Export. Z boot cuffs. Yes. Accept. File. Export. Z pants. Yes. Accept. And file, export, Z tunic. Yes. Accept. Now, to give a better demonstration on how the clothing actually follows the morphs, if I go to, let's say, these baggy pants, It's got muscular and a calf adjustment, but it's got nothing else. I then go to the male figure, go to races, add in dwarf, reduce the dwarf to 0, go to orc. Uh-oh. I know I forgot something. Alright, go to orc. And drop that down. I go to Shadowrun Troll. And I drop that down. Now when we go to Baggy Pants, under races it has Dwarf, Orc, and Troll. That can be dialed in independently. Same thing goes with the boots, the boot cuffs, and the tunic skirt. I mean, if we try and turn on Troll for a non-troll, oh boy, that's not going to fit. So that's why we did that. Cut back over to ZBrush, and we're going to have to import ZBody. And you can see, oh no, he's got a look. And we can also see that we kind of, well, we kind of screwed up the neck rigging, but I'm almost there. Actually, let me go ahead and go down to masking and grow the mask a few, and then smooth out the neck without touching the jawline. There we go. Let's unmask that. Zoom out. But yeah. Now we can go ahead and insert polymesh, import boots. Insert polymesh, import pants. Insert polymesh, import tunic. Insert polymesh, import boot cuffs. And then insert polymesh, import sword. We're actually going to do the sword before we do anything else, because we've got to make a nice little choppy onto that sword. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to geometry, we're going to subdivide it until it looks pretty smooth, and then give it one more on top of that. Delete lower. We're going to Dynamesh, and we're going to Dynamesh it at 768. Dynamesh. Then give it a layer of subdivision. Okay, now it's looking good. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of tilt it slightly. Tilt it back to here. We're going to turn the body back on, just so we can make sure that we're putting the break at the eye level. And then we're going to go to trim rectangle. Okay. And we're going to Control Shift. And when we cross over it, it's going to be about, we're going to do it about here. Everything that's currently inside that white rectangle will be removed and closed off. Okay. Now we're going to kind of tilt it a little bit more. We're going to, actually no, we need to tilt it this way. Yeah, here we go. We're going to bring it down to there. So now he's staring at a broken blade. It's quite clear what he's looking at. This is the sword, the broken blade for our Knight of the Broken Blade. So we're going to hide it and go back to him. Now, one of the things we're going to do, we're going to smooth out this area here. And then we're going to use, it's the fact that it's on inflate, and we're going to inflate it back out so that it fills in the little gap over here and then comes forward, because this is too small to print properly as a hollow empty mouth on even a resin printer, because with the resin printer we want to be able to paint what we print. So I'm going to close that up a little bit, and that should be good. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and subdivide it a few times until it's around 1.5 million, plus, give or take a few 100,000. Divide. 2.2 million, that's good enough. And we're going to Dynamesh it at 1024. Dynamesh. Okay, now there's a couple flaws in the geometry of my figure, specifically right in here where the ring finger is, and then right here. That won't be too visible on the other hand because it's not bending there. Well, I take that back. It is a bit visible, but we still also have to come in here with the ring finger and then kind of blend it. Okay. That fixes pretty much most of the flaws in the geometry. Let's kind of smooth this a bit, just for the sake of getting it nice and smooth. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to load in the boot. We're going to make the boots visible. Frame. Now the boots aren't really boots. What they are, it's geometry that covers the feet. See, there's the feet inside the geometry. And makes them flat bottom and look like regular, well, boots. So what we're going to do is we're going to subdivide them a couple times. One more time. And then we're going to click on him, go to merge, and merge down. It says this is not an undoable operation. I'm going to say always okay. Now, the next thing we do is we go down and we look in geometry and we see that the Dynamesh button is still yellow. What that means is if there's nothing masked out on the figure and we hit Control and drag out a square or a rectangle or anything like that, it sits there for a second and fuses the two into a single surface. So we're now going to go, I'm going to switch to standard so I can get a slightly bigger brush and smooth out those seams from where they meet the calf. Do it on both legs. Okay, and now it fuses down and it looks like it's part of the foot. We then make the pants visible for the same reason, but first we're going to smooth, oh, shnikes, I got to select the pants. We're going to smooth this area right here, make it less dramatically muscular. Okay, and then we're going to subdivide it. Then we click on our buddy and we merge down and control draw. There we go. Now we're going to smooth out the seam. This time I'm also going to hit the number 1 so it smooths twice when I do this. Now normally I'd be a little bit upset because you'll notice that the legs meet and then have another gap. Well, that's going to be covered by our tunic, so I'm not that concerned. Make sure that that's pretty much all of it. The boot cuffs can be just visible. I'm gonna subdivide them just to be smooth, and now we're gonna make the tunic visible. Now you'll notice that the tunic is low poly. Gee, what a shock, huh? Yeah. Totally out of the blue. I don't know where that came from. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to subdivide it a little bit. Geometry, divide, divide, divide. One more. And we're going to merge down. And we're going to control drag. And presto, it becomes one piece with the figure. This is good. Our figure is going to be more of a barbarian than a fighter, apparently. And we're going to smooth around and hit 1. We're going to be giving him a belt here. And we want this belt to actually look like it's, you know, holding up this. We're also going to smooth out that in the back of the legs. Okay, and then alright, now frame up. Now for the belt, what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate this whole figure, and then we're going to smooth around the waist in the front, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then smooth around the waist in the back. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We did that, and we're doing it here so that when we make our belt, it's going to be even and not as based on the musculature. Now what we're going to do is we're going to tilt it slightly because his hips are tilted. I bring it to about there, and we're going to click and drag, and then add a little bit more underneath. A little bit thicker there and a little bit thicker this way. And that gives us a nice broad belt that goes around and emphasizes how his hips are not parallel to the floor. Remember what I was saying about not having the hips parallel to the floor? This belt helps emphasize that they're not, despite his upright posture. Okay. Now we go down, now that I've got that masked off, we go down to extract under the subtool menu. Now if I click extract with the default stats, will it look good? Yes, actually, it looks pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and click accept. Now it comes in masked. I'm going to hit control drag and unmask it. I'm going to go back to here. I'm going to control drag and unmask it. I'm going to hide it, make the regular body visible, and I'm going to smooth out there because I kind of forgot to do it on the main figure. Yeah, so he's got a belt. However, belts usually have buckles. Fortunately, I have an easy way to make a belt buckle. I come over here to where it says insert gemstone, and oh look, number 4 is a buckle. I made this myself in 3D Studio Max, and I go ahead and I open depth under the brush menu, and I change it from embed -20 to embed 0. And I'm gonna put the mouse as close to the middle of the belt, top to bottom as I can, and bring it down until that little bit hanging off is the same width as the regular belt. Okay. Now when we pivot around, we can see that it's got a problem that it's kind of sticking up over here. So we're going to move, and there's a green circle there. We rotate it slightly. And a little bit more. Come back here. Okay, that's good. We go back to draw, and we click split under the subtool menu. Split unmasked parts. Bing! Because we need to give this belt buckle a little bit more geometry. Divide, divide. Delete lower. And then we're going to merge down. Merge down. And the belt is by itself now. But it's in a position to where it makes a nice border between the cloth of the tunic and the skin of the upper body. Now, we want this guy to be a bit more interesting than just having clothes on the lower half of his body. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to another one I've got called belt stuff. We've got a scabbard. I'm going to take the scabbard. I'm going to put it on the right hip. Such a size that it could feasibly have been, okay, that's too small then. I'm going to make it big enough to where it could feasibly have been the scabbard for this sword. Okay, that's about the size that would fit this sword, but it's not in a good position, so we go back to move. We want it to be attached near the opening. We're also going to tilt, we're also going to come around and measure it, rotate it this way. Okay, bring it back that way, bring it over, bring it forward, and then up, forward, and out a little bit, and then down, because again we want to try and make it as, bring it in just so that it's, yeah, and so he's got a scabbard for that sword, and we can theorize that the rest of that sword is inside the scabbard. But he might be a barbarian, but he still needs some place to keep his stuff. Well, we got a backpack, and we can take it on, oh, let's go ahead and split unmasked parts. Split off the scabbard. We can go ahead and place this backpack kind of on its side on his back. And we can see that didn't work well, so we're going to undo. We're going to place the mouse here, dead center, and pull it back like that. Okay, that's good. Now we're going to move it. Obviously we need to move it in. We're also going to kind of move it down a little because it's going into his neck. We don't want that. And then we're going to rotate it slightly like that, and then bring it in again. Now being that, and we're going to split unmasked parts. Now being that it's on an angle, that means that the strap for it will also be at an angle. So we're going to rotate our buddy so it's about right, hide him, go to this guy, and we're going to just draw, strap will be about here. Make it about there. Okay. It's pretty clear that strap is going to the backpack. Now we're going to extract at 2. That doesn't look quite right, does it? Because it's got that, it's following the geometry of the figure. So what we're going to, first we're going to make it a little bit thicker, 0.03. And we hit extract. Okay, then we're going to hit accept. And we're going to draw to get rid of the masking. Select our test body and draw to get rid of the masking. Make the regular body visible. Okay. And now we need to make this strap smoother. We're going to do this under geometry by Z remesher. We're going to go adapt to size 100, turn off adapt, half, and Z remesher. It's going to go from 70,000 to about probably between 30 and 50,000. It's not going to be exactly half, it's going to be reduced roughly half. Okay, 29,000. So it did go half, but that's not enough. That's still too many polygons. We're going to do it again. We just hit Z remesher again. This time it's not going to take anywhere near as long because it's got less than half as many polygons to calculate with less than a quarter of the number of connections between polygons. Okay. At this point, I'm going to turn on that. And we can see that it's trying to actually follow the edge flow of the bend in the chest. Once again, we don't really want that. I'm going to move this to the standard brush so I can shrink it down a bit. We're going to give it one more Z remesher. And it's even faster this time. Okay, now I'm going to smooth out here down the center of the belt over the chest. Turn off. Okay, now I'm going to subdivide it and give it another coat, which if you notice it's not smoothing as fast as it was before. I'm going to keep this little wrinkle coming down right here. We're going to divide it again. And now it's nowhere near as fast because it's trying to smooth out over the same surface area a whole lot more polygons. Frame out. It's got a nice organic look to it, but it's not perfectly strapped across the muscles. And then on top of that, we're going to hide that crease even further, going back to our buckle and adding a big old buckle here. Okay. And now we're going to move. You'll notice that it's actually oriented along the buckle, not the figure. We're going to rotate it this way a bit and this way a bit. I'm going to pull it down a little. Let's rotate a little bit more. Okay. Now, we're going to go back to draw. We're going to split unmasked parts. And then here on the belt itself, we're going to move, the move tool. And what we're going to do, we're going to turn on transparency so we can be sure of what we're doing. We're going to grab this side and pull it in a little. Well, we grab this side and pull it forward and slightly in. Then we're going to grab here and pull back a little, just a little. the end result, now let's grab this and pull it in. Turn off transparency, and we're going to make sure that this fits a bit better. And that helps hide that wrinkle as well as the seam, not seam, but the dip in the chest. Now, with the buckle selected, we're going to subdivide it a couple times and merge the strap with the buckle. Merge down. We're also going to bring the backpack down, and under geometry we're going to subdivide it quite a bit. Bing, bing, bing. Delete lower, and there we go. We're going to merge it together, down. Merge down. So the backpack and strap are one piece. Frame out. Now, the next thing we're going to do is, well, about the only thing left to do now, besides fuse it all together, and with everything visible, of course, is to add hair to the head and add wrinkles to the boots, tunic, and maybe the bag. Kind of give some sag to it here. Whoop. So we're going to go ahead and make everything invisible except for our buddy. We can also delete our imperfect buddy, the one that we smoothed out his waist a bit too much. Now this time I'm not hitting always OK. And the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to hide his arm and hand. 1, 2. Now 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. You'll notice that there is a gap on his scalp because his hair was too, his hand rather, was too close to his scalp, and it fused the scalp and the hand. That's okay. What we're doing now is going to need this. Now with the standard brush, so we can get smaller, make it even smaller, I hit Control and hold down the focal shift 0. Now you notice how when I tap Control, not only does the cursor here turn from red to yellow, but up here it goes from standard to mask pen. Holding down Control lets you mask. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to first draw on a general shape of where we want the hair to be. Now this isn't where the hair is coming out of, but rather where the hair actually is. And then we're going to kind of fill in that little gap, including right over here. Okay. Notice that the hair is a little bit longer than usual. That's because this is supposed to be a barbarian. Okay. It's a long-haired hippie sword swinger. We're now going to make the rest of him visible. We're going to go down to extract and change it from 0.02 to 0.01 and extract. Accept. Draw. Draw. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to geometry, Dynamesh 128. Bam. Then we're going to 1, 2, 3. Smooth this carefully over the edges. Then we're going to divide it. 1, 2, 3. Delete lower. It's only got 60,000. We're then going to go to clay buildup, switch to a round tool, and then stroke, turn off lazy mouse. And we're going to kind of, oh, I forgot. Anti-masking, backface mask on. That's to keep it from dragging the polygons that are inside the head to the outside, which is something we don't want to happen. And I'm just going to kind of build up along here down at the back and bottom, so it's more like it's more like it's hanging hair as opposed to a spandex scalp cloth. And then we're going to smooth it out a bit here because it was starting to stick out. Now I'm going to turn on transparency. Because the hair is a separate piece from the rest of him, we got... Okay. Now normally I would then turn and use the clay buildup tool to draw on your strokes and then slash to emphasize them. I think I'm going to make this guy a bit shaggier than usual. I'm going to go to Lightbox, Brush, and there's a brush that I got a while back. It's interesting. And then what we're going to do, we're going to start from the bottom. We're going to go to Modifiers, make sure that Multi-Mesh Selector is at 3. Variations is up as high as it goes, and Variation Selector is at 3. Now, let's go down here and we click and drag up, and you'll see that it's going randomly through each one of these up top. And so we're going to make him have really shaggy, curly hair. Okay, and then we're going to kind of come around, just make sure that we're doing this all over, and then just continue with the larger chunks on the back of the head. And yes, this was my plan for the entirety of working on this guy. This will give him, like I said, a nice shaggy look, a less groomed look. If I had kept him as a nobleman in concept, I probably would not be doing this. But no, I made him a barbarian. Now I turn off that. It also helps him look a little bit more disheveled and disturbed. Next thing is we're going to turn on the belt, because it's from the belt down that we have wrinkles on our tunic. And here I am going to use the clay build-up tool and just kind of draw in where the wrinkles might be. Okay. Not heavy wrinkles, but not bad. Make it a little bit bigger. Smooth it just a bit. Not a lot, just a bit. Especially on the leg here. You'll notice that adding those wrinkles was all additive. That's because I don't want to then suddenly turn on the scabbard and find that the tunic has drifted away from the scabbard. What we're about to do next is subtractive, but not very strongly so. We go to slash. Let's bring stroke out permanently. Turn off lazy mouse, drop that down to 14. And we're going to shrink it to about there. And we're going to just very lightly draw in a groove at the bottom of these wrinkles, not in the space between them, but at the bottom of each of these little strokes I made from before. Yes, if they're right next to each other, it looks like it's in between, but like for example here, it's not. Here, it's not. Well, it eventually becomes so, but then just kind of bring that up. Bring that up. Oh, yeah, bring that forward and bring this one down, because it's not exactly the same stroke. Okay, now what we do, we switch from Z sub to Z add and change it down to about 8. Now let's make it 7. And we just draw the bottom third of the wrinkle, once again to emphasize that it's gravity creating these wrinkles, not someone sitting with a stylus at a computer. Even though we both know that's created by someone with a stylus at a computer. I'm just going to kind of bring these in and zigzag them at the side until we get to this bottom one. Come around this way, bring this over like that, and like I said, just follow these wrinkles near the bottom of the wrinkle. Okay, that's all we need to do for the wrinkles on the tunic. We then make it that visible so we can see it. Okay, Now, one thing that we definitely need to do is we need to add in some wrinkles on the toes and ankles of the boots. And that's also going to be done with a slash brush, but we're going to make it smaller. We're going to start off with the Z sub at 12. Not very strong. And especially right here on this one foot that's mostly unbent. We're just going to add a couple wrinkles in the front of the ankle and a couple wrinkles at the toe. Also, we need to smooth that. There's some areas where they kind of overlap with the foot, and I missed them the first time around. And then in the back of the ankle, there's going to be a couple up a little bit, just ever so slightly lower than the ones in the front. Now here, we're going to have the same ones on the ankle, but we're going to have different ones at the toe. We're going to smooth out this. We're going to wrinkle here, right where there is a bend, and then in front, and then just a little bit there. Just to emphasize that's where it commonly bends. And then one there, and smooth it out right there. Now we're going to drop it down to 9. A little bit higher than what we did for here, but that's because we're using a smaller brush and we need to make a little bit of a stronger example. So what we're going to do is we're going to go above and through and down. Actually, no, that's what we do on the back. We're just going to kind of above, between, and down. Above, between, and up, and down. We're going to kind of be off center with these, as if it's more common for it to bend slightly more on the inward toe than on the outward. And then on the backs, here's where we're doing a special. We're going to drop this down 2 points. We're going to draw like an eyeball shape around that wrinkle and then around this one. Okay, and we're going to do that around this too. Okay. Now we're going to frame out and just load in everything. And when we zoom out, we see it's a pretty nice looking figure. And it tells a story. It's more than just a figure. It tells a story. I'm going to put this up. And so what we're going to do, I'm going to merge down everything. And then when we look in geometry, we can see that it's still set for 1024. Well, just in case, let's change that to 1280. Just a little bit higher resolution. And then we click drag. And it's going to fuse everything together into one single solid surface with no overlaps. New soda. Now, what we're going to do from here, let's bring it in. We turn on polyframe. We can see that, well, first of all, let's go to polygroups, auto group. It becomes one single solid group. All right, we zoom in. We can see that it's made up of a whole boatload of polygons, and it's all fused together. And all these polygons are the same size. How many polygons? Up here, 2.177 million. So what we need to do is we need to make this a lot fewer because most slicers are going to choke on it. So we go to Z plugin. We go under Z plugin, to Decimation Master. Now here, we got to decide how much resolution we want this figure to have. And I'm thinking, before we do anything, we need to kind of smooth out the inner mouth, because it's still a little bit erratic. So I'm going to shrink this mouse a little bit more and smooth out that area in the inner mouth. As we can see, otherwise it came out beautifully. Alright, frame. There we go. So what we're going to do, we're going to make it a custom range 50,000 points. That's enough to get all of the detail in the wrinkles and the musculature and the hair and the bag, the expression, all of that, without being overboard. Really, what'll happen is it'll be 50,000 vertexes, 100,000 triangles. That sounds like a lot, but there's actually a lot of smooth slopes and a lot of sharp edges on this figure. So let's rock it. And now up there you'll see it says Analyzing Mesh. And now it's got that orange bar going across. And it's 60%, 70, 80, 90, and done. Now it's calculating, writing, reordering, and presto, 100,302 triangles. And looking closely, you can see those triangles are in varying sizes and shapes. The triangle at the end of the the strap here is a lot smaller than the triangles following the curve of the pectoral, and it's a lot larger rather. And it's only slightly larger than this one large triangle here, but it's about the same size as the triangles on the flats of that. Anywhere there's a large flat surface, the triangles get larger. Anywhere there's a sharp curve, for example, let me zoom in real quick, like these triangles along the edge of the strap, they get smaller. And if you look at the ones on the scabbard, they're really long and thin, because it's trying to reduce the polygon count nice and safely, and presto, we have Oops the Fighter. So we're going to export Oops the Fighter. Let's add in some spaces because that usually helps. Oops the Fighter. And that's that. Let me go ahead now and bam. And we got people being quiet in chat. AutoCAD is not good for organics. Really and truly, 3D Studio Max is a lot better, but with what I do, you need a sculpting program like ZBrush, Sculptress, or Blender. Yes, I know, Blender's a bit better than it was. I don't use it, but a lot of really good sculptors do. But making humanoid figures like that, AutoCAD really, it can't be done. You can do heavy armor sci-fi figures like, you know, Stellar Marines or something, but you really can't do a human with muscles and facial expression. If you're willing to spend the money, ZBrush is an amazing program, and it's what I use in all 218 episodes of this show. 218. But yeah, it's like $900. Now, admittedly, to date, and they're not guaranteeing it, but to date, every time there's been an upgrade to a new full version, it's been free for people who legitimately own a license. I started at ZBrush 3. It was at ZBrush 5, I think, when they switched to year-based updates. But there were like 4 updates during that time between 4 and 5. And I'm talking about updates that almost any other program would be going, okay, it's a full new version. What do you mean update? Nothing. This is a new version. They need to get it and pay that money. Nope. ZBrush is like, yeah, it's just, here, have a free update. We've added in like 12 totally new features that really help out in your sculpting. Blender, yeah, it's free. And yes, it's originally had possibly one of the worst user interfaces in the face of 3D graphics. But it's not as bad anymore. They actually got their act together and said, hey, look, we need to change our reputation. And Big Buck Bunny didn't help. It looked nice, but that's not something the average user is going to be able to do. We need to do something to help the average user. And that's get rid of duplicate plugins. You know, you've got 4 different ways to do this, and they're in 4 different areas of the program. How do you find which one you want? Rearrange the entire UI and get things like sorted. And let's add sculpting. Okay. Yeah, add sculpting. Anyway, Sculptress was originally one of the rivals of ZBrush, and it includes a dynamic subdivision as you're sculpting, which means if you're using it for something like creating a blend shape or morph, it's not good because it changes the order and number of vertexes. But for sculpting something like this, no problem. And now, Sculptress, being free by the way, is made by the same company that makes ZBrush. They even have incorporated Sculptress Pro, quote, inside the more recent versions of ZBrush. Now, what time is it? It's 8:47. Oh, not even an hour and a half yet. Wow. That was pretty quick sculpt for a very decent concept. The trick to making quick sculpts. Number 1, have a base mesh already made. My human figure, already made articulated base mesh. Number 2, have a library of assets. His boots, his boot cuffs, his pants, his tunic, his sword. All pre-made assets. Now, I made them. It's still 100% my work. But it's a pre-made library. I've got a pretty large library now, mostly of weapons. A few things that would be considered clothing. Plus a lot of assets of blend shapes. I don't have as much for the new figure as I had for the old. The old one had almost 20 different racial blend shapes. And thank you, Alex, and I hope you have a wonderful evening. And ta-ta! Okay. Now, I know I have at least one person who's going to be watching after the fact. Carl. The final figure for the Kickstarter that I was doing is done. The undead purple worm, Doom Worm, is done. But I still have to do, by the way, I should note, I did get the survey sent out. What I still have to do is I need to make 5th Ed D&D stats for the Doom Worm and the Sea Drake. And once I've got those done, and I've got it all sorted into a PDF file, and I've gotten the edited down version for the journeyman. 1 journeyman bid. 220 backers, 1 journeyman bid. Go figure. Yeah. And then once that's all done, I'm just waiting. I'll just be waiting on the return of the surveys. Okay. Now, let's see. Is there anything else I've done this week besides work since Sunday? Not really. I mean, it's all pretty much as it's been. Yeah, that's pretty much it. In case you're curious, the Doomworm, yeah, he's pretty nasty looking. And I'm not going to show the actual render, but this is the illustration used in the PDF file. That is based on a render of the actual figure. And it's kind of hard to see, but there's splotches on him where he's got like skin ripped away, revealing muscle with some kind of thick liquid oozing out, and a little bit of drool hanging down from between the 2 bottom mouth parts. That's Doomworm. An undead purple worm with the soul of a human serial killer trapped inside of it. Dark. Mud Deep better stay away from that sucker. We have worm signs such as, holy crap, what is that? Meanwhile, it's almost 9 o'clock. I started a bit early tonight. So right about now, it's been about an hour and a half. What I'm probably going to go ahead and do is I'm going to go ahead and sign off. I'm going to use 3D Studio Max to make sure that the file's cleaned up and to also save a copy as STL, since ZBrush pretty much only does OBJ. Well, there's a way to do it, it just... whatever. And then, once I got it cleaned up, I am not putting a base on it. This kind of figure is not normally going to be used as someone's player character on the tabletop, or as a character model in your army. It's really more of a storytelling figure, which means it's more likely to be part of a diorama. If you want to put a base on it, I've got a few. There's dozens of people who have all sorts of bases out there on Thingiverse. Or you can cut out a circle of plastic, clear plastic, and or whatever plastic. You can put it on a base that belongs to a Space Marine. Put on a base that belongs to this figure that I still have yet to really actually paint. You know, who knows? But he's not going to have a base with me. It's just going to be the figure. Anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and sign on out of here. And to do that, I'm going to hold up my hand. I'm going to count from 5 to 1. When I get to 1, I'm going to say something deep, funny, goofy, or stupid. And then go, eh, 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 eh. After I go, eh, 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 then I log out. Well, after I see on the screen the eh, 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 because that lets me know that I've caught up to the lag from YouTube, because there's a mandatory gap so that if something happens I can go oop. Anyway, so that's going to be a 5, a 4, a 3, a 2, and a 1. Never, ever let necromancers get their hands on a purple worm.